Hello again everyone, hope you didn't celebrate too hard over the Christmas holidays. I certainly did. That's probably why I haven't uploaded a video in a good few weeks. But I've managed to set aside a couple of days in between Christmas and New Year to maybe have a look at some things. So, I don't know how good your memory is, but maybe a couple of videos ago you might remember I began to hollow out roughly this guitar body. There's still a lot of material there to remove yet, but I decided that it was going to be a good idea to do a template to use with a router, which you saw me draw up. Very rough template. The accuracy of where these pickups and things are isn't very good, to be honest. I have got some new drawing equipment, mechanical pencils and things, which are going to help me do a little bit more accurate drawing in future, I hope. But for the time being, we've got a template. We drilled a hole in it, despite having a little bit of a mishap with the pillar drill. I did mention that I was planning on removing all this material that's not shaded in, and I was, for some reason, my initial thought was to do that on the router table. I don't know why, because it's going to be much easier if I just take the jigsaw to that and cut it out roughly, and then I can always tidy it up with a little bit of sandpaper. It's not going to need to be too accurate anyway, because at the end of the day it's going to be inside the guitar, so no one's going to see the exact shape of the cavities anyway. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to crack on and get that cut out, so maybe we can get some routing done on the guitar body today. So let's do it. After finishing the coffee. No letters regarding health and safety, please. So that should hopefully fit over there nicely. And give us a guide to route out by. Can already see there's some areas where I've actually gone inside that already, but I really don't think that's going to be a problem. Should all work out fine in the end. So the next thing to do is going to be to just hold this in place so that I can make use of it. I could go down the masking tape and super glue route again, but I think on this occasion I'm actually going to screw it in place. I've just actually come to use the drill and found that I think Frank's disappeared with the drill and all of the drill bits, which is handy, so I'm going to have to nip home and get mine. Back in a jiffy. And we're back, drill in hand. There we have it. That's screwed securely in place now, so I can confidently go around with the router using this as a template to start hollowing the rest of the material out. As I've already mentioned, I can see that there is some areas where I've already gone inside the template slightly. I'm not too worried about that. It's not actually encroaching completely on the post holes. The majority of the depth of the post holes is actually going to go into the maple cap rather than the body underneath anyway, but that should be fine. One thing I should probably mention now is that I'm probably going to avoid routing the horns out for now. I might do them down to like the first depth so that I've got a cut there, but I'm not going to take them to the full depth. The reason for that is this body shape, the PRS body shape, is normally made with a back that is about half the depth of what this currently is. If you can imagine that the MDF is about the same width as a normal maple cap would be, maybe slightly narrower, and then the PRS body would stop about here. This thickness of body is the thickness of body you would have on a nice chunky old Les Paul, and you wouldn't normally get a Les Paul in this shape unless you get a double cut model. I'm a little bit worried that it might look a bit silly with the horns being this thick, so I want to leave myself the option of effectively putting a carve as we get towards the neck, because the neck's only actually going to sit about this, probably about this deep into the body anyway, so I might just want to take about half an inch, a centimetre ish off the back just to make it look thinner, kind of like that optical illusion they do with laptops to make them look thinner. They always bevel them off at the edges. I want to get to the point where I've got a maple cap ready to go on before I decide what I'm going to do there. So for the time being, I'm probably just actually, as I say, going to concentrate on routing this out and maybe just do a first pass in this area, not going too deep. Let's crack on. Now, there's a couple of ways we could go about this. The thing we definitely don't want to do, which is kind of tempting because I could do it right now, is to try and use the router table upside down like that. But that's just absolute insanity, so let's not do that. The normal thing to do would be to take the router and attach it to some kind of sled that's going to stop it falling into these holes. It does come with an extended base plate, which would actually allow it to slide over here easily enough. It's a little bit clunky because it's not perfectly flat and everything, but it'll probably do the job. One thing I've seen a lot of people do is get a sheet of acrylic like this one and effectively make a base plate out of that and mount the router to that, and then that'll provide you with a nice big slippy surface. In fact, I can feel that is much better there as it is. Little tip for anyone who does want to go down the route of making a Perspex base plate. You really want to get a thickness of somewhere in the region of sort of like half a centimetre plus. In my local DIY shop, to buy a piece of Perspex that big, or acrylic I should say, to get that thickness, you were looking at buying a piece about twice the size of a car windshield, and it was probably going to cost somewhere in the region of something like £40. I think you can buy it a lot cheaper online, but all I did was go to the nearest glaziers where they make double glazing and all that kind of thing, and ask if I could buy an offcut of acrylic. They did only have the one thickness, but it's just thick enough, and I think this offcut cost me £2. So there's a little tip for you. But what we're going to do right now is take the router out the table and see if we can get it mounted into that base plate, and hopefully we should just have time to try making a pass on this. One router. Now, if one of these is screwed all of the way in, So that's all the way in. It's pretty much exactly flush with the acrylic, which is perfect. So I think I will go down the route of using the acrylic today. It means I might not get round to actually routing out, but at least I can get the sled ready to go for the next time. So, just for your reference, I'll find out the thickness of that for you. So for anyone following along at home, this piece of acrylic I think is about 3mm or just over 3mm. It's probably an imperial thickness, I don't know what it is exactly. But it's going to be whatever the standard is that gets used in Windows, I guess. Ideally, because the countersink of this bolt is actually going to be slightly longer than the entire thickness of the acrylic, I think 5mm acrylic would actually be ideal. If you have the option of going and buying a piece online or whatever to do this, I think 5mm would be perfect. These bolts, for anyone who's interested, the thread type on the Triton router, or the Triton router I should say, is UNC 1/4 inch. That's the large type UNC. These particular bolts are 1/2 inch in length. There's not a lot of room inside the router for these to go, so if you end up buying bolts which are too long, you will end up with the heads protruding and they won't work. So let's give this a try. It may not work. The plexiglass, or the acrylic I should say, will or may probably be a little bit too thin to do this, but I want to give it a go anyway, because even if it doesn't work, then at least we've learned something. So let's try and roughly find the centre. So there's the centre, and if I find the original base plate from the router, much like when I made the router table, I can use that as a guide for where to drill the holes. Now I've just realised that's not going to work as I intended, is it? Yeah, you know what, let me just make this a square. I'd rather do it right than have to do it multiple times. Exactly 17.5 inches. $25.5. So it's 8 inches longer that way. So I need 4. Square that off. And if I draw a cross from those corners this time, there we go, that should be square this time. So if I then take the base plate as I did before, so unfortunately we can't use the drill press to drill these holes out because the reach isn't actually long enough to reach the holes. Yet another argument to be made for a bigger pillar drill if you can afford one. So for those playing along at home, I've got a centre pointed woodworking drill bit. It's a 6mm bit, and I've actually lined up this hole with the hole in the router table just to give me a surface to drill on. Right, that's clearly not the right kind of drill bit because that has cracked slightly at the back. I think I'd still rather go for accuracy by keeping the bit with the centre point if I don't have the drill press. So I'm just going to crack on anyway. Oh well, one way or another, job done. So I'll just check that these holes do actually marry up, which it looks like they do. Now, this is going to be the tricky bit. This is the bit where I would have much preferred to have the drill press. I'm going to have to countersink these pretty much to the point where I'm almost through the material, and countersinking by hand is not usually very accurate. Box. Gone too far with that one, and I don't think there's anything I can do about it. Hey, too excited. Guess I've got to try again. Well, it's not exactly pretty or perfect, but I think we have a passable router sled. Definitely would advise 5mm thick perspex or acrylic. You know what, it just occurred to me before I started there, probably best to secure the workpiece before I set to work on it. So let's do that. Right, now that the workpiece is actually secure, we can proceed as planned. Yeah, that seems to be working just fine actually. Could do with the hoover on standby, I think, for extraction, but otherwise pretty damn good. Probably not that easy to tell there on camera, but it has actually cut a channel around the outside edge there, and you can see where I've kind of strayed across this material as well, which it has managed. It's a little bit difficult to tell what I'm doing when it's running, but it seems to be working okay. So let's carry on. Probably quite difficult to see from there. I'll probably take the camera and go around freehand. As you can tell, it's actually taken a pass from the wenge in line with the template. It has managed to skim across here where we didn't actually take any material out beforehand as well. It's done fine, and as I intended, I've stopped just short of going into the horns there for the time being. Might take that out later. So naturally the next job is just going to be to continue that down to the desired depth until the body's completely routed out. But unfortunately today time's got the better of us again. So until next time, goodbye.